Padye. We who seek liberation take refuge in that infinite light which illumines the hearts of all, which is the source of the Creator himself, and who breathes forth the infinite knowledge of the Veda. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So, good morning to everyone. This morning the topic is justice as seen from a Vedantic perspective. And let me say, I'm not sure that we will continue for the whole hour, but I'll say as much as I have to say on the subject of justice for now, and we'll see how far that goes. I got in early this morning, and so I am not quite up to speed yet. Not yet with my feet on the ground here in the States again after a very wonderful trip to Poland, a very good trip. Everything went well, including the journey itself. But from the time I left the hotel till I got here, it was about 26 hours of travel yesterday. So not continually in the plane, but that includes a 7-hour wait in Chicago between flights. So, so it's been a long 24 hours, or it was a long 24 hours. So, anyway, the subject is justice and Vedanta. It's hard to say justice from the Vedantic standpoint because the very word justice is not really translatable. We're used to thinking in terms, that is, we in the Vedanta tradition are used to speaking of Sanskrit words which cannot be translated into English properly. But we should remember that there are just as many English words which can't be translated into Sanskrit, and justice is one of them. Because the Western concept of justice, it didn't develop in the same way in India, and so there's not really an equivalent. If you look in a dictionary, you'll see that justice is translated as nyaya. But nyaya isn't justice. Nyaya is law. Nyaya is logic. Nyaya is law. It's not justice. And so you don't get the idea of justice from the word nyaya. You also see it translated as vichara. But vichara also isn't justice. Vichara, of course, refers to discrimination, distinguishing, analyzing. And so neither is justice. The closest you get to the concept of justice, and it is close, are the ideas of ritam in the Vedas and dharma in classical Sanskrit, starting from the time of the Ramayana Mahabharata. The earlier concept, the earlier Vedic concept was ritam, and which you are familiar with. The ritam referred to a principle of moral harmony within the universe, that the universe was constructed according to that there was a moral principle pervading the universe. Not as the idea in the West was, that justice is something which, or that morality is something which is mandated by God. No, the Vedic idea was not that. To put it in crude terms, and I recognize that these are crude terms, and the idea is more subtle than this, but to put in crude terms, the Western idea, religious idea of morality, is that God doesn't like certain things and does like certain things. And so to be moral is to do what God likes, and to be immoral is to do what God doesn't like. And so it puts morality on the basis of God's likes and dislikes. Now again, I admit that that's a crude way of expressing it, but it is a crude way of expressing it. It is the idea, just put in crude terms. And so the Vedic idea was not that. The Vedic idea was that the universe itself has not only physical principles like gravitation and other the laws of physics and chemistry and biology and so forth, but that there is a moral aspect to the universe as well. It's not just a physical universe. In fact, it's not primarily a physical universe. The physical part of this universe is what comes last. That's important to understand, because most modern thinking, and as you know, modern thinking has spread all over the world, replacing indigenous ways of thinking in different parts of the world, including much of Indian thought. Now, the traditional Indian thought is still there, but it has an overlay of Western thinking on top of it. Same with China, where during Mao's time, they made a very concerted effort to do away with traditional thinking, to destroy it. But they couldn't do it. Every time there was a little bit of liberalization in China, the traditional thinking would start surfacing again. But Western ways of thinking have dominated, and part of the Western thought, not even traditional to the West, but it's modern Western thinking based on the success of modern science, physical science, is that the physical universe is what is basic. Everything is built up out of the physical universe. The physical universe is what is real, and other things are built out of that. And from that standpoint, if you understand the laws of physics, chemistry, and then expanding to more complex systems up to biology, then you've understood the nature of the universe. And other things, you may have religious faith, you may not have religious faith, but that's somewhat superfluous to the whole question from this point of thinking. But the traditional ways of thinking all over the world, including the Hindu way of thinking, is just the opposite, that this physical universe is only the gross manifestation, the grossest manifestation of something which is far more subtle, going back to an original unity which is spiritual, and out of that this has come. And so the Indian idea is that the law of Ritam, or the fact, I shouldn't say it's a law of Ritam, because again, in translating terms, as I said at the beginning, they're Indian terms which are not translatable into English without a lot of explanation, and there are Western terms which are not translatable into Sanskrit or modern Indian languages without a lot of translation. And so the idea of law indicates a lawgiver, that somebody made the law. The laws are passed in Congress, and laws were passed by God. God gave the laws to Moses, and henceforward we have the Ten Commandments, which are moral laws passed by mandate of God. But no, the Ritam is not like that. It's not a law passed by somebody, neither by the Indian Parliament, which, like the American Congress, has a hard time passing anything, and nor was it mandated by God. So the Ritam is this principle, or the recognition of a moral dimension to the universe. And that if you are and it's an impersonal principle, it's not, again, mandated by God, it's not based on somebody's likes and dislikes, it's the nature of the universe itself. And that if you are in tune with that law of morality, or that principle of morality, Ritam, then your life will be in harmony, and your life will go upward. You will begin to evolve to higher states of consciousness. And if you are contrary to that principle of morality in the universe, then your life will get worse. The mind will become confused because you're out of harmony with the truth. So Ritam and Satyam are often paired in the Vedas. Ritam vadishyami, Satyam vadishyami. I will speak the right. I will speak the truth. So Satyam and Ritam, because Ritam was an aspect of Satyam, or Satyam was an aspect of Ritam. Now, Satyam would be more basic, because Satyam is that which is, and Ritam is the principle of that isness at the moral sphere. So the closest you get to the idea of justice, but I'll again distinguish them in a moment, is the idea of Ritam, which is similar to the Taoist, Taoist principle of Tao. Taoism has more in common with the Vedic ideas than it does even with later Vedantic ideas. That is, the idea of the Tao is that the Tao is called in English the way. And that there is the way that if you are in harmony with it, then you're in harmony with the truth. And if you're out of harmony with the Tao, you're out of harmony with the truth. And so the Tao was the way of life, the way that life is supposed to proceed. So that idea of Ritam, and then in later Hinduism, in classical Hinduism, again, starting very early, starting from the time of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, which was still the late Vedic age, when the Vedas were still the active scriptures of the age, not yet the Puranas, etc. Ritam developed into the idea of dharma. And so dharma, though most of you know the word ritam, but you're more familiar with the word dharma, like the Sanatana dharma and other uses of the term dharma. The same idea that there is a dharmic, the universe is organized, is made according to a dharmic principle. The dharma runs through the very nature of creation. Again, not that God decided, well, I'm going to put some dharma into the mix. I've got some clay and some water and some air and fire and all these things mixed together, and I'm going to pour some dharma in there too, because I want it to be dharmic. No, it's the nature of existence itself. Based on this is not stated in the scriptures, but it's an extrapolation from the scriptures, based on the unitary nature of reality. That if reality is one, non-dual whole, and out of that non-dual whole has come this universe, then dharma is the reflection of that unity. That if I hurt other people, then I'm hurting myself, because there's an underlying unity. If I do something, if I give a bad example to other people, then I am going against the unity of the universe. If I steal, if I lie, if I cheat, I'm going against the unitary nature of the universe. I'm not recognizing that the whole universe is one, and that I belong to that unity. I am an expression of that unity. I'm going against that, and so that becomes adharma. So again, dharma and ritam. Karma, the law of karma, again, is not a law in the sense that the ancient sages sat around and said, let's pass a law and we'll call it karma. No, they didn't vote. The Saptarshis sat and voted, and 4 of them voted for karma and 3 voted against, so karma passed. No, karma also works because of dharma. Karma works because of dharma, and dharma works because of the unitary nature of reality. So karma says that if I do a bad action, I get a bad result. If I do a good action, I get a good result. And again, that is because the dharma works, and dharma works because of the unitary nature of existence. So karma also is part of the, again, when you come to the idea of justice, which is the topic again, when you come to the idea of justice, you have to approach it in this way from a Hindu perspective, from a Vedantic perspective, that there is an ultimate justice in the universe, because if I do something bad, the result is going to come to me. One of the important corollaries of that principle, a very important corollary for us to remember, important because it brings a great deal of peace to us and also makes us better citizens, is to recognize that if karma is true, and you don't have to believe anything that you don't see the truth of, but in time we come to see that karma is true. When we've observed life enough, we see karma is true. If it's true, then that means that I don't have to go about punishing people. Yes, society has to have its laws, which are passed in Congress or Parliament, as the case may be, and where there are results to our actions and so forth. If I kill somebody, society has a right to punish me for it. If I steal something, society has a right to protect itself from thieves and murderers and so forth who are hurting innocent people. But I, as an individual, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to go around making sure that you are going to suffer because you did this, and I am going to make sure you pay, and so forth. No. The law of karma takes care of that. You can free yourself from that sense of vindictiveness that I'm going to make sure that you pay. You insulted me and I am going to see that you pay. You said something against me and I'm going to see that you suffer because of it. No, we don't need to think in those terms. That doesn't mean that you become, to use a phrase that Swami Swahananda used to love, but sounds funny to modern English ears, namby-pamby. Namby-pamby was a perfectly good expression 100 years ago, but nobody says namby-pamby anymore, except for Swami Swahananda. But people used to love it because it was so unexpected. You don't hear it anymore. So it doesn't mean that it makes you namby-pamby and useless and ineffective. No, it means that you don't have to bother your head about such things, because the law of karma is going to take care of it. Why should you involve your karma and make your karma more complicated by going around making sure that they are going to pay, and I'm going to make sure that they pay to the full extent of the law, and even beyond the law, I'm going to make sure they keep suffering because they insulted me. No, we don't need to do that because of karma. So karma also is, again, a close corollary. It's not justice, the Western concept of justice, but it's a close corollary. And of course, rebirth comes. I can't remember the figures. It's been a long time since I saw them. But there are a large number of Americans now, including Christian Americans and Jewish Americans, who accept the idea of reincarnation. My own aunt, who had no influence from India whatsoever, except that she used to make curried fish as one of her many wonderful recipes. That was about the only influence of India you ever saw in her. And the influence was just curry powder, which you would go to the store and pick up. And a recipe she got from a magazine back in the 1940s or 50s. But she believed in reincarnation. And I've seen Christian ministers who, again, have no contact with India, but who have asked me if I believe in reincarnation, and I say, yes, I do. It's not a dogma, but I am convinced it's true. And they said, well, I also believe in reincarnation. I met an old school friend once in a hardware store who I hadn't seen at that time when I saw him. I hadn't seen him for 20 or 25 years. And he was by now running a hardware store. He asked me what I was doing. I hadn't seen him since high school, and so I told him that I was a Hindu monk. And so he said, oh, do you believe in reincarnation? And I said, well, yes, I do. Again, it's not a dogma, but I believe in it. And he said, well, I believe in it also, though he had no influence of India. So the belief in reincarnation is widespread even in America now. But the idea of dharma, I'll collapse, just for convenience sake, I'll collapse ritam into dharma for now. But actually the idea of ritam was even richer than the idea of dharma. But the dharma, karma, rebirth, those all sort of go together. They work together. And then you have in Hinduism the dharma shastras, the law books, so-called, of Hinduism, which say what should be done and what should not be done, and what punishments should be given to someone who does what they shouldn't do. Again, they come from a classical period when punishments all over the world were very harsh, very harsh. And so we have to judge things by the temporal context from which they come, that is the time from which they come. As if we read them now, the punishments sometimes are horrible by modern standards, but that was true all over the world. So you'll find I've had Westerners challenge me with the Dharma Shastras. I say, well, what did they do in medieval Europe? Why do you point to something from 2,000 years ago in India and say, look at the horrible thing that they did? Look at what you did 300 years ago right here. You don't have to point to India to find something that offends your modern sensibility. You look a few years ago here and you'll find plenty of things to offend your sense of sensibility. So the Dharma Shastras, the laws, the law books, the Hindu law books, they also dealt with what we would call justice. But again, the idea of justice itself, the word justice, doesn't have really a corollary. We have conceptual frameworks which touch on justice. And so what does justice mean? because again, the talk is about justice and Vedanta, the Vedanta and the idea of justice, bringing some sort of understanding between Vedanta and the Western sense of justice. So justice, the closest I can come to it, there are many different definitions, and most of the definitions are very complicated, and they try to cover all of the ground and so forth. But the simplest definition I can come up with, that I can think of for justice, is fairness. The idea of justice is the idea of fairness. And fairness has many different, there are many different fields of justice. There's economic fairness. If you talk about economic justice, then the economic field should be fair. If you talk about legal justice, then the legal system should be fair. If it's a just legal system, it means that it's fair, that the punishment is equal to the crime, and not greater than the crime, nor less than the crime either. But there's a fairness to the legal system, the criminal justice system. There's a fairness to the way that criminals are treated, which includes punishment according to the crime, but not too much. So again, the sense of fairness. Justice comes into the field of opportunity. There should be justice in the field of opportunity for people. That is, there should be fair opportunity. In a modern democracy, that was part of the founding idea of America. Though originally it applied only to white men, but the principle was there, and that has gradually, as America has matured, it's spread to women, to other races, to Native Americans, African Americans, etc. The idea of fair opportunity, that everyone should have an opportunity. That's no matter how many times in America that might have been restricted, or the system might be unfair, including even today. But the general idea is, the general understanding is, that it should be a land of opportunity. America was sort of defined as a land of opportunity. Forget about the sins against the ideals of the country. That is widely recognized as one of the ideals of the country. So the justice also as far as access to resources go. That also means fair access to resources. That also there isn't such a thing now, not much of just right to access, but that was the idea of the commons, going back. The concept of the commons, it was all over the world and very strong in India as well, but the conceptual framework of the commons, the word commons, the concept commons, comes from England. The idea that land and water and the forest are there for the common good. They may be owned or controlled by the lord of the manor, but they are kept protected for the common good. So people can go to the forest to collect firewood, they can gather herbs, they can go get their mushrooms, they can dig up roots, they can take their cows and goats and sheep to graze in the fields and so forth. They can take water for domestic uses and so forth. So the idea of the commons. And so the idea of access, the commons was to provide access to people to the resources needed for life. So justice covers all of these fields, but it's the concept of fairness, that there should be fairness in the economic field, fairness in the legal field, fairness in criminal justice, fairness in at the social level as far as opportunity and access goes. So then we come to Swami Vivekananda, and I want to read a short passage here of his. And I'm going to save one sentence for later, because the sentence at the end is important, but I want to bring it in later in the discussion, towards the end of the discussion. And this is from Karma Yoga, Swamiji's Karma Yoga, but this unfortunately was edited out of all editions of Karma Yoga. It was not unpublished. I put it back in. I don't know if it will remain in, but it should be in because it's very important. It was edited out not for nefarious reasons, not for bad reasons. It was Miss Waldo, Ellen Waldo, that Swamiji had gave her full authority to edit his Karma Yoga lectures, to make a book. And so she cut out everything that didn't make a sort of linear book. Because Swamiji was wonderful at going off on tangents, and some of his tangents are filled with some of his greatest brilliance. But she wanted a book that would present itself well as just a linear development of karma yoga. So Swamiji says, talk of right and justice is very good inside schools and parlors, but when you come to deal with the world, right and justice are mere babies' talk. There are two things which guide the conduct of men, might and mercy. First, there is might. Everyone that is strong eating up everyone that is weak, from the lowest atom to the sun and the moon. Might, the power of the strong. Everyone that has power wants to take advantage of it. If a man has knowledge, he wants to take advantage of that. And if he is strong, of that. If a woman is physically beautiful, she wants to take advantage of that. Everything is used to get an advantage. That is might. What else is it? The other is mercy. What is heaven? Mercy. If we want to be good, be merciful. There's enough wickedness already. And again, the one last sentence I'll save till later. So this is a very striking passage. And I don't know how it affects you, but to a Westerner this would be shocking. And somewhat offensive also. It would be somewhat offensive. Swamiji didn't care whether it would be offensive or not. He just says that there is no such thing as right and justice. He says it's very good inside schools and parlors, but it's mere babies' talk when you come to the actual world. There are two things, might and mercy. And so I want to look at that a little bit and why he says that. Because again, to the Western mind, that is shocking to the point of being just sounding wrong. That Swamiji is saying something which is wrong and should never be said. Because the whole Western idea of society, whether it expresses justice or not, isn't the point. But it's based on the idea of justice. And so here comes some man from India trying to tell us after thousands of years of cultural development that there's no such thing as justice, when that's the main thing that we believe in. So why did Swamiji say that? First of all, because the world isn't fair. The world isn't fair. And that we all hear, East and West, in America, in India, in China, in South Africa, in Kenya, in Ecuador, everywhere, people learn sooner or later that the world isn't fair, that you have certain expectations of the world, and one of the things that you have to face as a child, and I still remember the first time I faced it, it was a terrible shock to me when I was 5 years old. It was a horrible shock to me. That the world isn't fair. It doesn't treat you back the way that you expect it to treat you. And so, first of all, the world isn't fair. The world isn't just. You say, well, Swami, what about karma? Karma does promise that there is justice. Yes, but that's over time. That's over time. At any given point in time, there is no justice. If somebody has done something bad to me, then yes, at some point they're going to suffer, but they're not suffering now. Right now they're enjoying life, they're having a great time. So right now there's no justice. Right now there's no justice. Somebody has killed somebody. Well, yes, they will have a long karmic road to go down. But right now there's no justice, right now. And so karma promises that over a long period of time, things are working themselves out. But by the time you've righted one wrong, you're in the midst of many other wrongs. And so there's no justice. Karma doesn't promise justice. That's why there's no way out of karma except for transcending it. That's why we don't try in the Hindu tradition, we don't try to to balance the karmic books and get free that way, because there's no balancing them. You're constantly making good and bad decisions, and that's constantly making new karma. And so there's no balancing in them. There's just transcending the whole process of karma. And so there is no justice at that level. The whole world, as Swami Vivekananda said many times, the whole world is lost balance. This world is lost balance. If all of the forces of the universe came into perfect balance, the universe would disappear. Creation would go back into the seed state of pralaya. That all of this would disappear. All of this that we see is broken balance, disturbed balance, trying to get back to a state of balance, but not being able to. It will finally do that when the universe itself collapses at the time of pralaya. So the idea of dharma and karma, they promise balance over a long period, but at any point in that period you find that things are out of balance. Things are out of balance, that the world is not fair, that there is no real justice. And so then so Swamiji says that the talk of right and justice is baby's talk. You find two forces at work at the human level, might and mercy. Everyone has, and you see that today written large. You see it everywhere, not just in America, you see it all over the world. But now, because the news media brings us reporting of the things that are happening everywhere, we can see that everywhere this is happening. Somebody gets power and they want to use it over other people. And yes, there are some people who are the best of humanity, who are filled with mercy, who are filled with mercy for others, but they are the few. And the greater number are those who are trying to exert power, trying to take every advantage that they can get in life. Examining this idea of justice further, we find that justice, our idea of fairness, again, if you just think of justice in terms of fairness, that our idea of justice is always within a particular context, meaning that there's no universal justice. I seek justice within a particular sphere. For instance, somebody has done something against me, and I want them to suffer. So then you get the idea, the present idea in American judicial system and criminal justice system, of victims' rights. And so a victim should have rights also. And so someone has killed someone's daughter, say, and you want them to suffer. And so the person goes to jail, and they spend 30, 40 years there, and then they're up for parole. And then it's found that the person has realized their mistake. They found that they realized that, yes, I did do it. I admit that I did it. And I'm very sorry. And I've converted my whole life. I've changed my whole life. I've become a religious person. In the prison, I try to help others. I spend all of my time trying to mentor other prisoners, and try to make amends for what I did wrong. But then the victim of the crime, and this happens over and over, not in every case, but it happens over and over. The victim says, no, I don't want him to get parole because my daughter is dead and she will never see another birthday. And so why should he get out of prison? Well, that's called fairness for the victim. But is that fairness for the person who committed the crime? The person who committed the crime has realized their mistake, has paid the time that the legal system said that they should pay, and they have reformed themselves so that they've become a good person. And everyone in the prison recognizes them, including the guards and the warden, and everyone else recognizes that this is a model person now. So in a fair world, that person, their change should be recognized. But again, justice is always within a context, and so the family of the victim still wants that person to suffer forever because my daughter is gone. And so they should never get out. They should suffer for the rest of their life in the most horrible conditions. And so is that justice? Is that fairness? No, that we can't think of that as justice. But within a certain narrow sphere, that is seen as victim's justice. You find in the area of affirmative action, which Swami Vivekananda promoted. He said that for instance, he said that if a student is behind and needs 4 teachers, then give him 4 teachers. The bright students will go ahead no matter what. So give more attention to those who need more help. And so he was in favor of what we call now affirmative action. But then there also you get injustices. And I'm not saying this against affirmative action at all. Like Swamiji, I believe that affirmative action is necessary. But at the same time, we have to recognize that justice can only be seen in a context, and outside of that context, it becomes unjust. So, and you see this in India, where there's far more affirmative action than there is in the United States. In the United States itself, there's so much opposition to it. In India, it's far, far stronger than it is here. And so here in this country, you see that somebody passes an exam with good results, but somebody from a disadvantaged group is put ahead of them because they want to give this disadvantaged group an advantage, which they have historically been denied. And so from a standpoint purely of test results, that's unjust, because this person has done so well on the test, then they should be pushed forward. But then society says, well, no, there's a context to this, that this community has enjoyed advantage for hundreds of years, but this other community was held back. And so we have to help them get forward. And so we need to push them forward and give them opportunity. So from the standpoint of just these two students, it's highly unjust. This person did well, better than this person did. But from the standpoint of historical justice, no, this person needs to be pushed forward because they've been historically disadvantaged, and they need to be given a greater chance because of that. And so again, you see that there's no such thing as absolute justice, absolute fairness. There's not. There's always fairness within some sort of context. And outside of that context, you find that the same thing that looked fair, it becomes unfair to somebody else. And so, again, Swamiji says that there is no such thing as justice and right, only might and mercy. So the context of justice, like victims' rights, or the rights for the person who is accused, the rights of the accused. You see somebody like, who is that, Nancy Grace. I don't watch television, but I have seen Nancy Grace once in a while on television. Somebody once asked her, have you ever thought anyone accused was innocent? And she couldn't answer, because she always comes out against everybody who's accused of anything. Said, no, I know that they did it and they should suffer, and they shouldn't get off with this. It was amazing to I never watched television, but I just happened to see, I knew about her, and I just happened to see this one time when she was being interviewed and said, well, has there ever been anyone accused of a crime that you thought was innocent? And she couldn't give an answer, because the answer was no. She always takes the side of the prosecutor. And so what kind of justice is that? So there's always a context, and the context is because of a different perspective. The different perspective we have as far as a situation goes, and the perspective is based on our worldview. There's a strange thing in America. It's not unique to America, but it is very much present in America. The father of one of my friends, an American, used to say that in America there's a very strong vindictive streak, in spite of all of the belief in democracy and equality and freedom and all of that. But there is a strong vindictive streak in America. That is the desire to make people, to punish people severely and make them pay. So it goes so far that you find that there are people in prison where all of the evidence points to the fact that they're innocent. Not proof, but the weight of evidence clearly shows that they are much more evidence that they're innocent. There's only circumstantial evidence which doesn't point to them being guilty, but it's possible that they were guilty. That's as far as it goes. But they still sit in prison 50 years later, like Leonard Peltier, the Native American leader. 50 years later, they're still, 40 years later, they're still in prison. Why? because two of our agents, the FBI agents, they were killed, and somebody has to pay. Somebody has to pay. That idea, somebody has to pay. Yes, but if he's the wrong man, is it right that he should be paying? No, somebody has to pay. And if he's let out, if he's pardoned by the president or something, then that's not acceptable to us. No, is that justice? Is that justice? So there's a context. The context is based on the perspective, which angle you're looking at the situation from, and that's also based on our worldview. What we think is right and fair. What we think is right and fair. And so now let me come to Swami Vivekananda's last sentence in this quotation that I read. He talks about, again, right and justice being mere baby's talk. That there are two things that rule the world: mercy, might and mercy. That these are the two forces at work in the world, and that there is no real right and justice. But then he says, the last sentence I read was, the last two sentences are, or actually more than that. What is heaven? Mercy. If we want to be good, be merciful. There is enough wickedness already. Now, that much I already read at the end of that passage. That if you want to be good, be merciful, because there's enough wickedness already. And then he says, even right and justice must stand on mercy. So now he had said that right and justice don't even exist. But here he says that right and justice must stand on mercy. So he's accepting the fact that there is a conceptual, there is a necessity for the concept of right and justice. We have to have a concept of fairness. So what he was saying before is that in the actual world they don't exist. They don't actually exist. And that you can see if you look around. You find, and you look in your own life, you find there's really no justice, except even karma, as I said. That's over a long period, but at any point in the period you find that, well, no, now there's no justice. There's a promise that a long ways ahead there'll be justice for this one thing, but then you'll still be out of balance when you get there because of something else. And so he's saying that there is actually no right and justice here. But the concept of right and justice are important, but they must be based on the idea of mercy. Otherwise, you get situations like, again, the victim who says that, well, yes, I don't care how much this person has reformed himself, still he took away the life of my daughter and he should never get out of prison. Well, no, is that mercy? If it's not mercy, then it's not really fair. Now, mercy, again, doesn't mean just letting anybody do anything or letting anybody get away with anything. No. Society has a right to protect itself from those who are out to harm innocent people. Certainly, society has a right to do that. But the system should be based on mercy. That is, that if a person has changed, if a person has righted themselves, then they should be given an opportunity. And certainly, fairness based on mercy could never condone a system of 3 strikes and you're out. 3 strikes and you're out. There are cases where the third time somebody stole a loaf of bread because they were hungry, and that was their third crime. And so then they're put in jail for life, no hope of parole, because they stole a loaf of bread, because they were hungry. That's property rights gone to an extreme which itself becomes unjust. And so even right and justice must stand on mercy. So what are we to do? If our sense of justice, our sense of fairness, even our sense of mercy are based on our worldview, and our worldview feeds into our perspective, and that gives rise to these different contexts for looking at the same situation. What are we to do? One thing we should do is to examine our perspective. That is, we should examine our own perspective on life, not just accept our ideas as given. Most of us go through life without ever questioning our basic assumptions about life. But no, if we want to lead a spiritual life, and if we want to lead a good life, we have to be ready to examine our own perspective on life. How is it that I see the world? How is it that I see other people? How do I see myself? How do I see my relationships with other people? How do I see my relationship with the world, with human society? How do I see myself in relationship to the physical world? I just came from Poland for the COP24, the climate change, International Climate Change Conference of the United Nations. And that was the whole discussion at COP24 was climate change and what can be done, where government officials from around the world were there to try to hammer out international agreements. And then people like myself were there as part of the process of NGOs discussing from their own perspectives. The people I went with, the Global Peace Initiative of Women, our participation was the inner dimensions of climate change. That is, what we need to change within ourselves in order to be effective in the world where the climate is changing, and how our inner perspective affects the attitudes towards climate change, etc., pro and con. But we see, because of climate change is one thing, it's true anyway, but because of climate change we can see more clearly that my attitudes towards the physical world also are extremely important. How I use resources, how I consume, all of that is that now is taking on a moral component. And so being ready to examine my perspective, and then examining it and also enlarging my perspective. So it's not just me and my family against the world. That's the case with most people, is it's me, and a good person includes their own family, but most people it's me and my family against the world. No, I have to expand my perspective and see that I'm part of the world community. And so what I do affects others as well. And why am I more important than other people? No, I have to include other people in my perspective. And from a Vedantic standpoint, I have to learn to see everyone as divine. I can't stop short of that. That may take a lifetime of effort to even get a glimpse of it, but let me spend my life trying for that. Let me spend my life trying to get to the point where I can see others as divine, or I can see everything as divine. Everything is worthy of respect. Everyone is worthy of respect, and everything is worthy of respect. So that's what we need to do. And then in concrete system, and in concrete terms, we see again at the level of society, and the level of our participation with society, at the level of nations dealing with nations, and societies dealing with societies, and so forth. If we have this idea of fairness, justice, in the sense of fairness, and that is based on mercy, then that should eventually, if enough people become possessed of that idea, then eventually it will change our criminal justice system, where it's not seen as just punishment. You did something wrong, and I'm going to make sure that you suffer to the maximum extent of the law, and you're never going to stop suffering as long as I'm here to see to it that you suffer. No, that's not criminal justice. That's not fairness. That's vindictiveness. And so areas like the many areas, I'll just mention examples. Areas like diplomacy versus war. Yes, an individual has a right to protect himself or herself. If someone is coming to harm you, you have every right to defend yourself. And a nation has a right to defend itself if it's being abused or taken over by another nation. But, as was believed in all ideas of a just war, that just war was often, it was a very flexible term, and it was stretched to fit whatever war you wanted to have. If you wanted to fight somebody, then you stretch the definition to fit your present fight. But no, that war was always seen by those who had some legitimate perspective, legitimacy to their balanced perspective, was as the last resort for self-protection. But the diplomacy should always come first. Diplomacy should always come first. And we see in the present day world the terrors that have come about by rushing into war. We don't even have to go back several years. Just look at Yemen, what has happened in Yemen, with the massive starvation and disease, and the hundreds of thousands of people who have been killed and who are starving, and and so forth. Why? There's no good explanation except for one group of people not liking another group of people. If we want to have a world, and again, the world is unbalanced and it's going to remain unbalanced, and it's going to remain unbalanced because it's the nature of the world, and that will be true at the individual level, at the social level, at the national level. But part of the play of forces within the world, which keeps the world somewhat balanced among these opposing forces, is the effort for justice and mercy, fairness and mercy, because if that's not there, then it goes all the way to the other side. And so we have to know which side to put our thumb, which side of the scales to put our thumb on. And that should be on the side of fairness, on the side of equality, on the side of mercy, on the side of diplomacy, as opposed to rushing to war whenever we disagree with another nation. One of the good things in the modern world, everyone is always pointing to things in the modern world where everything has gone to hell. So it's good to point to the good things in the modern world. And one of the good things in the modern world is the idea that everyone has a place in the sun. Everyone should have a place in the sun. At one time, again, in this country, and it would change depending on the country and the ethnicity and so forth, but in this country, there were wonderful ideals by the founding fathers, but they were founding fathers not because we don't want to recognize the women, but because they were men who wrote the documents and so forth. The women were there doing great things, but they weren't part of the public picture. And so the wonderful ideals of the founding fathers, which still are inspiring, and yet they were seen in a very restricted context. They were for white men, meant for white Christian men mainly. Even though America was not founded as a Christian nation, in spite of what the Christian right says, this was not founded. It was deliberately not founded as a Christian nation. Deliberately, intentionally, stated in the documents. Was not founded as a Christian nation. But it was widely recognized that it was meant for Christian white men. But the ideals were there, and the ideals were much larger than that, and the ideals were stated. And so there's a gradual expansion of these ideals to cover more and more people, so that it's not just men. Let white women also be part of it. And then it's not just white men and women, but let African Americans and Native Americans also be part of it. Let people from other countries share in these ideals. Let the gay community also share in these ideals. Let people of different backgrounds share in these ideals. So this gradual expansion of rights so that people of all types are given a place in the sun. Now people who say that, well, if you do that, Swami, then what about the criminals? You say, well, let the murderers and pedophiles and all of these people come out and have their place in the sun too. Well, no. There's a great fear in the modern mind, which people put out as a bugbear, the bogeyman, of the slippery slope. Oh yes, there are some slippery slopes in life, but most of these slippery slopes are just inventions. People who are claiming that everyone should be given a place in the sun, they're not talking about pedophiles and murderers and thieves and all of that. No, that's ridiculous. Should give people credit for being more intelligent than that. We don't need to be afraid of the slippery slope. So we have to cut it off before we get to gay people or something. We have to cut it off because then you're going on a slippery slope and you'll never stop. Well, no, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. No. So let everybody, except for those who are harming society, those who are harming other people, let everybody have their place in the sun. And even those who are criminal, then they should be given the chance to redeem themselves. Some won't. Some people are so, their mind is so set in criminal ways that they don't even want to. They may be sociopathological or something, but they don't want to change. but give people a chance to change, give people a chance to redeem themselves. So this idea that everybody has a right to a place in the sun, that should be given, and that should be celebrated, that should be honored. So let me close, and then I'll see if there's a question or two. Let me close by reading the prayer of St. Francis to close on a inter-spiritual note. The prayer that I'm sure all of you have heard. If you haven't, you should hear it because it's a beautiful and universal prayer. And it expresses the idea of mercy and expresses the idea of expanding our perspective to include everyone and to give a place to everyone and to recognize that justice, that is fairness, has to be based on mercy. So this particular prayer of St. Francis, there are others, but this particular one is just called the prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Now let me see if there are any questions or comments. Okay, I saw Deepak first. His hand was half a nanosecond before yours, Sanchali. So first Deepak and then Sanchali.
Swamiji, is it human nature to always expect immediate justice? And if the answer is yes, then how we are being taught to look for justice in the long run?
Yes, a good question. And yes, I think it is human nature to want justice now. But let's also understand that usually it means I want justice for me now. I want justice, I want my justice now. Not everybody, not everyone is so selfish, but for most of us it's I want justice for me right now. So to learn how to deal with the world as it is first necessary to see that that is the nature of the world, that the world is out of balance, and that the world is not just in the sense of everything happening in a fair way right now. That there are karmic processes, there is the principle of dharma, but that's over a long period of time where things are never completely balanced out. They're always moving towards balance, but never completely balancing out. And so I'd say the first thing is to recognize that that's the nature of the world and we can't change it. Another thing to recognize is what I said early in the talk on the law of karma, that I don't need to, it's not my responsibility to make sure that somebody else pays for something that they have done wrong. Now, of course, in social interactions and things, in the short term, yes, you're perfectly right to do that. For instance, if you're selling books and you say the book costs $4.50 and somebody gives you $3.50 and walks away, then you have a right to tell them, wait a minute, you owe me another $1. You don't stop and say, well, the law of karma is going to balance things out in the long run, so... No. So you ask for the balance right now. But in more complicated situations also, if somebody robs your house, then you call the police. And if they ask you to testify, you say, yes, I will testify, and so forth in court. And I will say that, yes, this is the person I saw stealing things. So that most of life you handle at a practical level, but when in spite of that, you're not getting justice, then to realize that I don't need to break my head over this. The justice will come in the long run. So yes, let me seek justice as I see it in the present situation through practical means, as far as I can. But even then we find that things go against us. Things go against us. Somebody has paid off the judge. Or the judge always sides with the corporation that has harmed you, and you're an individual and the judge doesn't care about you. And so you can't get justice that way. Then know that, no, there is a higher justice which is working itself out. Not complete justice for once and for all where everything is balanced, but in this, every situation works itself out. So realizing that as well, so that, because otherwise we have no choice. Do I want to, and this happens to many, many people who feel that they've been cheated by life. They can never get over it. They spend the rest of their life just, why did they get away with that? How did they get away with it? Why did they allow them to get away with that? They shouldn't have done it. Well, it's happened. It's happened. It's over. It did happen. And there's no more recourse. I don't have any. So am I going to allow myself to be eaten out from the inside out, just destroy my life, being concerned by why did that person get away with it? No, no. So a lot of it is just enlarging our perspective and realizing that I can do what I can do. Beyond that, I can't do, and then I have to let go. Let go and realize, well, let the universe take care of it. The universe, God, however we think of it, the larger forces at work in the universe, they will take care of it where I can't. So, Sanchali.
I have two questions, Maharaj. I don't know if you have time for both. But first, pardon my ignorance, I don't know what the Dharma Shastras are.
Okay. Okay,
Should I tell you the second one also?
Yeah, tell me the second.
Okay, the second one is you read that passage and you said it was left out of the Karma Yoga. How did you get hold of them, and are there like several that you know of?
Yes. Luckily for us, well, let me say the Dharma Shastra first and then I'll come to that. Dharma Shastra is very simple. That's like the laws of Manu. The laws of Manu, and there are many Yajnavalkya, and there are many different Griha Sutras, many different law books that were written by different sages about Hindu law. What is proper action, what is improper action, what the punishments for improper action should be, how society should be organized, and so forth. So the laws of Manu are the most famous, but there are many other texts like the laws of Manu. And as Swami Vivekananda said, those law books are meant for a particular time and place. They're not universal. They were never meant to be universal. And so he said that the principles of Vedanta are universal. Those are true just like the principles of science, like gravitation. That was true a million years ago, and it's true today, and it'll be true a million years hence. And so the principles of Vedanta are principles, and so they are true. They're not dependent on time and place. But social contracts and social laws and social understanding, that is dependent on a context. And so those change, and they have to change. And if we try to impose, that's the whole problem with those who in the Muslim world who want to impose Sharia law. Sharia law, that functioned at one time. And by the standards of an earlier time, Sharia law is not harsh. It looks harsh to us today, cutting off a hand for stealing and things like that, cutting out the tongue for lying. That looks harsh today because we have a different understanding of justice. But at the time when Sharia law was established, that was true everywhere. It was true in India and Europe, all over the world. They had a harsh sense of justice. But the problem is trying to impose that today when our perceptions have completely changed. We're not going back to that. Society is not going back to that. There may be people who, in their fanaticism, who capture a country or capture part of a country and impose Sharia law, or governments in some countries where they impose Sharia law, but those are backwaters. And the march of history is in a different direction, and they will be pulled along with the march of history. So that has to change. So now about, what's it? Oh, yes, thank you. The excerpts from Karma Yoga. Yes, that is available, luckily, because when Swamiji was giving his lectures on Karma Yoga in New York in the winter of 1895-96, December, January, February, in that period, Goodwin was there, who was taking down in shorthand all of Swamiji's lectures. And Swamiji had given the devotees in New York the right to edit the lectures, Miss Waldo principally, to edit the lectures and to make a book. And they had the right to publish the book and to sell it and make money for the Vedanta Society in New York. And, but he sent the transcripts of these lectures to Mr. Sturdy in England and said, I've seen the letters where Swamiji says, that these may help you. You're giving classes in England, which is good. These lectures of notes, or these transcripts of my lectures may be helpful to you in giving your classes. And so he sent them to Mr. Sturdy to help him give classes. But what Mr. Sturdy did was, he took them and published them without telling Swamiji anything about them. He put them in a book and published them. And so there was only one edition because Swamiji was terribly upset with him. Not because he didn't edit the transcripts, it was because he had given the rights to the book to Miss Waldo. And here Mr. Sturdy, before they came out with their book, Mr. Sturdy was publishing another book. So Swamiji was terribly upset with Mr. Sturdy and told him that you must desist and not publish again another edition. But that one edition was found its way into archives, and so the only problem is that Mr. Sturdy published them without any editing, just Sturdy's transcripts, but one of the lectures he didn't publish. So whether he didn't get that from Swamiji or whether he just thought that it's superfluous or whatever, but out of the 8 Karma Yoga lectures, one of them we only have what Miss Waldo edited. So, okay, so time is up now. So, let me give a closing prayer and then I'll give announcements. Om Dyo Shanti Antariksham Shanti Prithivi Shanti Apa Shanti Oshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Sama Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace is in the sky, peace is on earth. Peace is in the waters, peace in the plants and the trees. The gods are peace. Peace is the nature of truth. All is peace. Peace alone, peace. May that peace, real peace, be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all the beings of the universe. Now for announcement.